With 97% of the delegation in agreement, the Sol system classification is affirmed. Harmless.
The vote lasted 13 seconds. That was how long it took the Galactic Council to decide that Earth was harmless. 13 seconds measured by the chamber clock above the central dais, a clock that had watched empires rise, treaties fail, sanctions pass, famine relief stall, and 800 years of officials mistaking procedure for wisdom. The vote lights blinked in polite sequence. Green, 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 abstain, green. Red from the human seat, of course, though nobody expected anything else. Then green again, until the result spread across the chamber wall in calm white letters. Earth civilization, strategic threat classification lowered to minimal. The room made the soft sound rooms make when important people relax at the same time. Counselor Thalen Voss of the Meridian Combine folded his hands and allowed himself a small smile. He had argued for the reclassification for 6 months. He had done it carefully, with numbers and charts and a tone that suggested reason itself had filed the petition. Earth possessed only 9 registered interstellar patrol vessels. Its largest declared military hull was a border cruiser too small to intimidate a customs station. Its navy spent more money on disaster response than weapons. Its diplomats spoke too often about shared security, medical corridors, refugee guarantees, and historical trauma. It had no expansion fleets, no tribute network, no conquered moon belts, no credible power projection beyond its immediate neighborhood. Thalen had summarized the matter beautifully during the final hearing. Humanity is emotionally intense, he had said, but strategically small. They are loud in moral language and quiet in tonnage. The Council must learn to distinguish between drama and capacity. Many delegates liked that sentence. It let them feel intelligent while dismissing something that had made them uncomfortable for years. The human representative, Ambassador Leonace, had not argued much during the final session. She had sat beneath the blue-white Earth emblem with her hands folded on the desk and listened while others explained her species to one another. She was 71 years old, silver-haired, straight-backed, and known for sending very short replies to very long letters. When Thalen finished his speech, the chair asked if Earth wished to respond. Assay rose slowly. The Council has counted what we registered, she said. That is not the same as counting what we are. There had been a few amused movements in the chamber. Not laughter exactly. More like the pre-laughter of people too dignified to make noise in public. Thalen had leaned toward his microphone. Ambassador, with respect, unregistered war capacity would itself be a treaty violation. Not if it cannot move, Say said. That had produced real silence, only for a moment. Then the chair moved the session along because chairs are trained to save rooms from sentences that might become dangerous if left breathing. The vote happened 13 seconds. Earth became harmless by law. Within 2 hours, the consequences began. The Meridian Combine filed a resource arbitration claim against the Outer Sol mining belt, arguing that several asteroid clusters registered under emergency human development protections no longer required strategic exemption. The Keller trade ring requested access to the old Saturn lanes, which Earth had kept closed for reasons described in public records as navigational heritage preservation. The Arvani Defense Bloc asked the Council to reconsider restrictions on military transit within 3 jumps of human space. None of the filings were technically hostile. That was the point. They were knives wrapped in paperwork, thin enough to slide between treaty clauses and polite enough to be discussed over lunch. By evening, news feeds across the core worlds were running variations of the same headline: Earth overclassified for decades. Council corrects historical error. Markets approved. Security analysts approved. Admirals from larger powers approved most loudly of all, which should have made someone nervous. In a lower archive office beneath the council chamber, a junior historical analyst named Ril Anvek read the vote result and did not approve. Rill belonged to the Orathi, a small gray-skinned species known mostly for careful memory and poor public speaking. He had spent 11 years cataloging pre-integration civilizations, which meant he read old records no one used until someone needed a citation for a speech. His office had no window. It had 4 failing light panels, 6 million pages of translated history, and a kettle that made a sound like a creature losing an argument. Rill liked it there. Quiet rooms rarely lied. Earth's file bothered him. Not the current file. The current file was thin enough to be insulting. Patrol tonnage, trade presence, population distribution, diplomatic behavior, registered weapons, naval expenditures, all neat, all recent, all useless. The old file was different. Humanity had arrived in galactic records late but not young. That was the first thing most analysts forgot. By the time the Council noticed Earth, humans had already survived themselves several times. They had passed through climate collapse, machine revolts, resource wars, plague centuries, lunar secession, the Mars famine, the Belt mutiny, the quiet years when entire stations shut their lights off so raiders would think them dead. Before they had diplomats, they had shipyards. Before they had council translators, they had warning beacons. Before anyone called them harmless, they had built weapons for wars the galaxy had never seen because the galaxy had not been watching yet. Rill opened the oldest Sol military registry available in the archive. It was 412 years out of date. Most of its entries were marked retired, dismantled, ceremonial, or lost. Most. He stared at one category for a long time. No mobile strategic HULLS. There were no tonnage figures attached, no weapons details, no drive signatures, no orbital positions, only names and status notes translated imperfectly by an old algorithm. A Hannibal station sleeping. Winter treasury sealed. Grief of Mars under mountains. A patient thunder ocean cradle. Saint of last resort legal dormant. Rill read the list twice, then a third time. As the kettle clicked off behind him, he forgot to pour the tea. On Earth, Ambassador Say's report arrived at the external office in Nairobi just after midnight local time. It went first to the diplomatic desk, then to the defense liaison, then to a restricted archive authority that had not received a live council classification update in 38 years. The system read the vote result, confirmed the legal language, compared it to 620 treaty dependencies, and produced a notification that woke 4 people. One of them was Admiral Mara Ionescu, retired. She lived in a coastal town on the Black Sea in a narrow house full of books, weathered maps, and windows that did not quite seal in winter. She was 83, walked with a cane, and had not worn a uniform in 9 years. When the secure terminal beside her bed chimed, she opened her eyes before the second note. Old service teaches the body which sounds are allowed to enter sleep like a knife. The terminal displayed one sentence. Council strategic reclassification has triggered outer guarantee review. Ionescu sat up slowly. Her granddaughter, asleep in the next room after missing the last coastal train, did not wake when the old woman crossed the hall. She did wake when Ionescu opened the locked cabinet under the stairs, because the cabinet had 3 mechanical bolts and no interest in being discreet. Bunica, the granddaughter called. Go back to sleep, Elena. Is it a storm? Ionescu looked at the black case inside the cabinet. It had no logo, no serial number, just a recessed palm plate and a strip of old brass engraved with 7 words in Romanian. For the day they forget our winters. Maybe, Ionescu said. She placed her hand on the plate. The case opened. Inside was not a weapon, it was a key. At the same time, in an underground facility beneath the Andes, 3 engineers were pulled from dinner by sealed orders. In Tycho City, a lunar judge received an emergency legal packet and began reading faster than her clerks had ever seen. In the Martian city of Kasey, Old sirens sounded in a district where no siren had been tested in living memory. Across the asteroid belt, maintenance crews who thought they worked on abandoned mass drivers discovered that their access badges had quietly changed color. Earth did not mobilize. Not visibly. It checked logs. For 9 days after the vote, the galaxy enjoyed its conclusion. Commentators explained the post-human security landscape with great confidence. Meridian analysts predicted that Earth would protest loudly, negotiate carefully, and concede gradually. The Arvani defense bloc began moving ships toward the Saturn transit dispute, officially for escort exercises. The Keller trade ring sent survey drones toward closed lanes and claimed navigation law permitted it under the new classification. The council scheduled hearings at a leisurely pace. Ambassadors say attended every session. She objected when required. She submitted documents when requested. She did not raise her voice. The more calmly she behaved, the more certain Thalen Voss became that he had been right. Earth was angry but contained, proud but practical, harmless enough to manage. On the 10th day, the Arvani crossed the red line. It was not called a red line in public records. Public records called it the Saturn Heritage Exclusion Shell, a protected navigational volume containing historical debris, unstable early drive test zones, and restricted memorial sites from the pre-council era. To the Arvani, it looked like wasted space wrapped in human sentiment. Their commander, Fleet Marshal Dareth, brought 12 cruisers and 3 survey carriers through the outer markers and broadcast a polite notice of temporary transit. The warning beacon answered immediately. This volume is closed under Sol authority. Alter course. Dareth laughed when he heard it, not cruelly. He simply found old machines charming. Transmit our council authorization. His comm officer did. The beacon answered again. Council authorization not recognized for this volume. Alter course. Primitive jurisdictional lock, the comm officer said, likely centuries old. Dareth waved one hand, bypass it. The first survey carrier crossed the inner marker at 11:48 ship time. At 11:49, every clock on every Arvani ship stopped. Not broke, stopped. Digital clocks froze, mechanical clocks locked. Navigation timers held their last count. Reactor pulse monitors paused between heartbeats without losing reactor function. For 6 seconds, the entire task force existed inside a silence so complete that even automatic systems seemed to be waiting for permission to continue. Then the carrier's forward lights illuminated something in the dark. It was a hull. At first, Dareth thought it was an asteroid. Then the survey beams crawled across angles too deliberate for stone. Armor plates black with age, gun trenches sealed under layers of dust. A prow shaped like a blade turned sideways. The thing was enormous, longer than his flagship, half buried in a loose ring of ice and metal debris. It had no active drive signature, no heat, no life signs. It was dead. Then a line of white light opened along its side. The Arvani bridge went silent. Letters appeared on Dareth's main display, translated from an old human military language by his own system. You are standing on a grave. The dead hull woke one system at a time. Not quickly, that was what made it terrible. Modern ships snapped to readiness in bright cascades. This one returned like something remembering how to breathe. Heat moved under armor that had not warmed in centuries. Dust lifted from weapon seams. Ice cracked along the dorsal spine and drifted away in glittering sheets. Along the side of the hull, old nameplates emerged beneath frost. Grief of Mars. Dareth suddenly understood that the Saturn shell was not a memorial because humans were sentimental about debris. It was a memorial because something had been buried there on purpose. Back us out, he said. His helmsman moved immediately. Nothing happened. The ship was functional, engines ready, navigation green, but every attempt to accelerate produced a calm refusal from the drive control system, not failure, denial. On all 15 Arvani vessels, the same message appeared. Trajectory hold imposed by local GRAVITIC authority. Local what? Dareth whispered. The grief of Mars opened a channel. No human face appeared. The voice was artificial, low, and scarred by old audio reconstruction. Unidentified fleet, you have entered a restricted Sol War grave. You have ignored 2 warnings. You are being held for escort. Do not power weapons. Do not launch craft. Do not attempt to cut the hold. The living will not be harmed unless they insist on joining the dead. The channel closed. 3 light minutes away, another old hull woke. Then another. Then the Saturn dark began to fill with names. Patient Thunder, Old Argument, Mother of Ash, the 9th Door, Winter Treasury. Ships no council registry had counted because no council registry had understood that non-mobile did not mean unusable. Some unfolded from asteroid shells. Some rose from beneath methane seas, dragging silver liquid from their armor as they broke surface and lifted into night. Some had been built into moons so completely that the moons seemed to open their eyes. They did not point all their weapons at Dareth. That would have been less frightening. They pointed enough. The council received the Arvani distress petition 41 minutes later. The petition did not say attack. It said immobilization event. It did not say surrender. It said involuntary tactical pause. It did not say fear. Official military language almost never says fear, but the attached sensor images said it for them. Thalen Voss called an emergency session. Ambassador Say arrived 15 minutes late. She apologized for the delay and took her seat beneath Earth's emblem. Her expression was unreadable. Thalen hated that expression more than anger. Ambassador, he said, before the chair had fully opened discussion, Earth appears to have activated unregistered strategic assets inside a disputed volume. Say looked at him. No. No. Earth has activated registered non-mobile historical defense systems inside sovereign Sol memorial space in response to an unauthorized military incursion. Those are warships. They are old warships. The chamber noise rose, then fell when the chair struck the tone bar. Thalen leaned forward. You told this chamber they could not move. I said they could not move, Say replied. I did not say they could end. Azat wake. In the archive office below the chamber, Ril Anvek watched the session feed with both hands pressed flat against his desk. Around him, old files were opening in cascading windows. Human pre-council military engineering, dormant mass, legal definitions, Sol exclusion zones, memorial treaties, insurance annexes, funeral ordinances. He had found the trick too late. The council had counted engines. Humanity had counted positions. The old warships did not need to cross the galaxy. They had been placed centuries ago at every place humans had decided no foreign fleet should ever stand comfortably. In ice rings, under moons, inside abandoned shipyards, at the mouths of closed lanes, around memorial fields. Sleeping, legal, registered in categories boring enough that no ambitious analyst had read them. Harmless if the enemy stayed away. The Arvani did not stay away. Fleet Marshal Dareth's voice came through the emergency channel, strained but formal. He confirmed that his crews were alive. He confirmed that the human systems had allowed medical scans and offered technical assistance for a reactor fault on one cruiser. He confirmed that any attempt to power weapons resulted in the affected ship being rotated gently but firmly away from the colony lanes like a misbehaving child turned from a fire. Have the humans issued demands? The chair asked. Dareth hesitated. They have asked us to leave. And we cannot. Why not? Dareth looked away from the camera. They have not let go. The phrase entered the public record and immediately escaped it. They have not let go. Across the galaxy, feeds replayed images of ancient human hulls holding a modern Arvani task force motionless without firing a shot. Commentators who had spent a week explaining Earth's harmlessness began explaining nuance. Military analysts became very interested in the difference between active fleet tonnage and dormant area denial infrastructure. Meridian markets dipped, then dropped, then stopped pretending not to panic. Thalen Voss requested a closed session. Ambassador Say objected. This chamber lowered Earth's classification in public, she said. Its correction can occur in public. The smaller delegations supported her before the large ones could organize. That was unusual. The small powers had watched the vote too. Many of them lived beside stronger neighbors. Many of them knew what it meant when paperwork declared someone safe to pressure. The image of an old line holding had reached them in places no speech could. So the session remained open. Thalen tried law first. If these systems possess strategic capacity, Earth concealed material force. Say answered the systems were registered in the annexes as non-mobile historical hulls. They are non-mobile, they are historical, they are hulls. Well, this is bad faith. No, Say said. Bad faith is reading only the documents that support the thing you already want to do. That line would be quoted for years, mostly by people losing arguments in committee. The chair asked the question everyone wanted answered and no one wanted to ask. Ambassador, how many such hulls exist? Say looked down at her desk for the first time, not in hesitation, in calculation. Oh, enough that you should stop testing categories. The council chamber became very quiet. At the edge of Saturn's space, the grief of Mars released one Arvani ship. Only one's. It was the smallest escort, chosen because its medical bay had the best radiation shielding for the injured crewmen aboard the cruiser with the reactor fault. The old warship opened a precise path through the hold field and transmitted coordinates to a neutral medical station. The escort drifted free, engines limited but functional, and left the exclusion shell under silent escort from something that had once been mistaken for a dead mining platform. While the rest remained. Human patience is often misunderstood by species that meet humanity after civilization has polished its edges. They see negotiations, aid missions, long meetings, apology notes, memorial days, and the exhausting human habit of making moral language out of everything. They mistake all of this for softness. They do not understand that patience in humans is not the absence of violence. It is the storage of decision. The old warships were patience made of armor. They had been built after the Inter-System War when Mars burned, Luna fractured, and Earth learned that any species capable of reaching another world was capable of carrying its worst habits there. They were built by exhausted people who did not trust their descendants to stay lucky. The first generation called them anchor fleets. The second called them shame engines. The third called them too expensive. The fourth forgot their names. The fifth turned them into memorial law because that was easier than explaining why the guns still worked. But maintenance continued. Quietly, legally, religiously almost. School children visited the lick parts and learned about the cost of war. Engineers visited the sealed parts and replaced components with hands that did not tremble because their grandparents had taught them what the ships were for. Judges reviewed dormancy statutes every decade. Admirals retired with keys they hoped never to use. Families argued about funding them during elections. Artists called them ugly. Pacifists called them necessary and hated that the word was true. When the council declared Earth harmless, the old system did not wake because it felt insulted. It woke because the legal conditions around predatory encroachment had been met. The second test came from the Meridian Combine. Thalen did not order it personally. That would have been foolish, and he was not foolish in ways that left fingerprints. A Meridian commercial security flotilla already operating near the outer belt received permission from its corporate command to inspect a disputed processing cluster. The cluster had once been a war refinery, later converted into a memorial foundry, later leased to civilian miners, later wrapped in so many overlapping protections that only lawyers and ghosts knew its true status. The flotilla commander, a woman named Sarek, had watched the Arvani humiliation and believed she understood the lesson. Do not enter exclusion shells, do not power weapons, do not ignore warnings. She approached the cluster slowly, broadcasting legal documents on repeat and keeping her ships outside the marked boundary. Nothing happened. For 6 hours, nothing continued happening. Sarek relaxed. Her legal officer relaxed. Her weapons officer did not relax because weapons officers are paid to be professionally suspicious, but even he stopped gripping the console. Then the processing cluster spoke. Meridian Flotilla, your claim references Council Reclassification Appendix 7. Appendix 7 is under dispute. You may hold outside boundary pending review. You may not scan internal memorial works. Sarek opened a channel. We are not crossing the boundary. You are scanning internal memorial works. She looked at the sensor officer. He looked guilty. A passive scans only, he whispered. The cluster answered before Sarek could speak. Passive disrespect remains disrespect. Then the asteroid behind the flotilla unfolded. It had been on their charts as Rock 8814, carbonaceous, low value, not worth mining. Its surface split along 6 impossible seams. Armor rose beneath dust. A spinal cannon the length of a city rotated once, not toward the flotilla but toward empty space, as if stretching after a long sleep. Hundreds of small lights opened across the hull. The name appeared in Meridian translation. The Saint of Last Resort. Sarek said a word her command recorder later rendered as culturally inappropriate. The old ship did not trap them. It did not need to. It placed a targeting solution on every Meridian vessel and transmitted the solution back to them with helpful annotations. Distance, time to disable, casualty estimate if they behaved sensibly, casualty estimate if they did not, recommended safe withdrawal vector. A polite note that their legal documents had been archived for future hearings. Sarek withdrew. Her report was short. Meridian Command attempted to bury it. The Saint of Last Resort published it in full with spelling corrections. By then, the galaxy was no longer laughing. The Keller trade ring should have stopped there. It did not. The Keller were not warriors by temperament. They were accountants with engines, merchants who had turned contract law into a cultural art form and profit margin into a devotional practice. Their trade ring controlled a third of the commercial traffic between the inner core and the eastern spiral. They did not invade, they acquired access. They did not threaten, they revised pricing. They did not fire first, partly because weapons damaged infrastructure and infrastructure was expensive. So when the Arvani were held and Meridian was embarrassed, the Keller concluded that everyone else had simply been too direct. Their target was the Helios backlane, an old human transit route near the inner edge of Sol space. It had been closed for 200 years, officially because of unstable early fold geometry and accumulated memorial debris from the first failed colony convoys. Unofficially, the Keller suspected it remained closed because it shortened 3 profitable routes that humans preferred to control indirectly through tariffs and rescue contracts. They sent drones. No crews, no weapons, no diplomatic risk, at least according to the legal department. 12 needle-shaped survey drones entered the outer mouth of the backlane under silent running, carrying passive scanners and a polite claim that if discovered would insist they had drifted off course due to a software fault. Keller executives liked software faults. They were cheaper than apologies. For 11 minutes, the drones saw only dust. Then they found the ships. Not warships, not at first glance. The backlane was full of old civilian hulls, thousands of them preserved in a slow graveyard of failed departures. Colony arcs, mining tenders, fuel barges, hospital ships, school ships. The first human attempts to leave saw in numbers large enough to matter and fragile enough to die when the math of early fold travel proved less friendly than hope. The Keller drones passed between them, mapping shapes, recording serial numbers, translating memorial tags. Inside the Keller control room, technicians became quieter with every image. One drone drifted close to a broken arc named Morning Lesson. Its hull had split open long ago, exposing decks where classrooms still hung in vacuum behind shattered glass. Small chairs remained bolted to the floor. A mural of Earth and Mars, painted by children who had never reached either destination again, curled along the wall in frozen strips. The drone scanned it. A human system woke. It was not a ship, it was the lane itself. Every memorial hull in the backlane lit one small marker lamp, thousands of pale points opening in the dark like candles no atmosphere could extinguish. The drones stopped moving, their engines still functioned, their instructions still existed, but their navigation systems no longer accepted commands from Keller control. On the far side of the lane, something unfolded from behind a field of dead arcs. A Hannibal station. The archive had called it sleeping. The archive had not mentioned that it was built from the first human fortress ever assembled outside Mars orbit, later dragged to the backlane and anchored among the lost convoys like a guard dog lying down beside graves. It was ugly, asymmetrical, and enormous. Its armor looked repaired by angry generations who had disagreed about aesthetics and agreed about purpose. Across its central tower, old letters burned awake. We watched the road that failed. The Keller legal department received a transmission before the control room did. Unauthorized commercial survey of memorial dead is recorded. Drones are detained. You may petition for their return after apology, audit, and compensation for desecration. The lead Keller executive, whose name was Tav Mur, read the message 4 times. Desecration, he said, they are machines. His assistant, who had watched the feed from Morning Lesson, did not answer quickly enough. Tav Mur turned, they are machines. Oh yes, the assistant said. But he said it the way people say yes, when they are beginning to understand that the technically correct answer is useless. The Keller filed an immediate protest with the council. It claimed unlawful seizure of commercial survey equipment. It claimed human overreach. It claimed that unmanned drones could not violate memorial sovereignty because machines lacked intent. Hannibal Station answered by publishing the drone routes, their scan priorities, the false software fault packet, and a Keller internal memo titled Opportunity created by human downgrade. The memo was only 9 paragraphs long. It destroyed 3 careers before breakfast. Ambassador Say brought the Morning Lesson image to the next council review. She did not play the whole feed. She did not need to. She placed one still image on the chamber wall. A frozen classroom inside a broken colony arc, chairs still aligned, a child's painted sun peeling from the ceiling. This, she said, is why the lane is closed. No one spoke. The Keller representative attempted to say that his government regretted any unintended sensitivity. Say looked at him with a face so calm it was almost merciful. A sensitivity is when you step on someone's foot, she said. This is a grave. The Keller representative sat down. After that, even the large powers began reading the annexes. Ril Anvek stopped sleeping properly. He built a private map of every human-protected volume, every old memorial, every closed lane, every unprofitable asteroid with too many maintenance contracts, every moon with seismic anomalies shaped like docking cradles. The map became dense with red marks, not everywhere. That would have been simpler. The marks formed a pattern around Sol and human-administered corridors, a defense web that did not project conquest but made intrusion look increasingly unwise. He brought the map to his supervisor. His supervisor stared at it for a long time, then said, "This is impossible." Rill had worked in archives long enough to dislike that sentence. It is documented. Why did no one know? Because we asked what they could send at us, Rill said, not what we might wake by going to them. The supervisor sat down. The council's third emergency session opened under a different mood. The great powers arrived angry. The small powers arrived early. The human ambassador arrived with a paper folder, which everyone had learned to fear because Ambassador Say only used paper when she wanted people to remember a moment had wait. The chair began carefully, Earth is requested to clarify the operational scope of its historical defense systems. Say open the folder. Earth requests reinstatement of its prior strategic classification pending full review. Thalen's mandibles tightened. That sounds like blackmail. Well, it is a correction. You have immobilized a council member's fleet and threatened Meridian commercial vessels. The Arvani fleet remains alive because our systems were restrained. The Meridian flotilla remains unembarrassed only because our systems were restrained. Unembarrassed, saw Rex report had leaked by then. Several delegates made the mistake of looking at the Meridian bench. Say continued. The Council declared Earth harmless based on active expeditionary tonnage. Earth did not challenge the vote by revealing classified defense infrastructure because we assumed Council members would respect existing borders while review proceeded. That assumption was optimistic. Thalen Rose Earth engineered this. For the first time, Say looked angry. Not loud, not theatrical, simply colder. Counselor, Earth engineered the old warships because humans once learned what happens when threats are noticed too late. You engineered this morning because you believed harmless meant available. The chamber held still. The chair asked, what does Earth intend? To hold every vessel currently violating protected sol space until formal withdrawal is signed. To publish a complete list of all reclassification-dependent claims filed after the vote. To request disciplinary review of any council office that encouraged military transit during active classification appeal. To remind this body that Earth has not fired on anyone. Yet, Thalen said. Say did not look away, correct. The word landed harder than a threat. At Saturn, Fleet Marshal Dareth signed the withdrawal order on the third day. He did it aboard his own flagship, under the silent observation of a human liaison team that had arrived in an unarmed shuttle from Titan. The liaison commander was a woman named Captain Noradebio. She wore a simple dark uniform and carried a tablet full of release conditions. Dareth expected triumph from her, or contempt, or the moral lecture humans were famous for delivering when they had won. Instead, she asked if his injured crewman had reached the medical station. Yes, Dareth said. Good. Your machines held us for 71 hours. Yes. They could have destroyed us. Yes. Why didn't they? Adebio looked through the viewport at the grief of Mars, ancient and vast. Its weapon seemed still glowing faintly in the ring light. Because they are old, she said. Dareth did not understand. She explained young warships want to prove they can kill. Old warships know that makes them calmer. Dareth looked at her then properly. Are you making a joke? As a little. He did not laugh. He would later, years later, but not then. The release took 6 hours. One by one, the Arvani ships were let go, each escorted to the boundary by dormant hulls that had become very awake. Before Dareth's flagship crossed the outer marker, the grief of Mars transmitted one final message. Do not step on graves and mistake quiet for consent. Dareth saved it. He never admitted that to anyone. The political damage spread faster than the military reports. Every claim filed against Saul protections became suspect. Every delegate who had voted for reclassification found reporters waiting outside their offices. Smaller systems began reviewing their own dormant defenses and discovering, mostly to their disappointment, that they had none. Human allies who had been quiet during the vote out of diplomatic caution became suddenly eloquent about historical context. The Meridian Combine tried to salvage the narrative by arguing that Earth's old warships proved the original reclassification process had been deceived. That might have worked if the annexes had not been public for centuries. Boring, obscure, badly indexed, but public. Real Anvek was called to testify before the review panel. He hated public speaking. He did it anyway. The information existed, he said, gripping the sides of the lectern. It was not hidden. It was filed in categories that matched human law rather than our assumptions. The failure was analytical. A Meridian delegate asked whether any reasonable analyst would have interpreted non-mobile historical hulls as active strategic assets. Rill blinked slowly. After this week, he said, the hearing recessed for 10 minutes because too many people reacted. Ambassador Say sent him a note afterward. It contained only 2 words. Good answer. Rill printed it and placed it beside the kettle. On Earth, Admiral Ionescu returned the key to its black case. Her granddaughter Alina watched from the kitchen doorway, arms folded. Are you going to tell me what that is now? Alina asked. Ionescu locked the case. No. Obunica, you would be annoyed. I am already annoyed. The old admiral sighed and sat at the table. Morning light moved across the worn wood. Outside, the sea was gray and ordinary, which felt like a privilege. When I was young, Ionescu said, I commanded ships that everyone could see. Later, I was trusted with ships no one was supposed to need. Not because we wanted war. Because humans are very good at forgetting the cost of being unprepared once the memorials become pretty. Alina sat across from her. Did you awake them? I helped ask if they were still listening. Were they? Ionescu smiled faintly. Old ships are like old people. We pretend to sleep, but we hear more than anyone thinks. The Council reinstated Earth's prior classification 5 days later. The vote took longer than 13 seconds, much longer. Delegates wanted amendments, explanations, face-saving language, procedural buffers, and a new term that did not sound like everyone had been frightened into accuracy. In the end, the document used the phrase latent territorial defense capacity, which satisfied no one and therefore passed. Earth accepted the reinstatement without celebration. The Arvani withdrew from the Saturn dispute. Meridian suspended its outer belt claims pending review. The Keller drones left the closed lanes after one of them reported being followed by a small object that looked, according to the embarrassed technical note, like a museum cannon with engines. The note was never confirmed. It was enough. Thalen Voss lost his committee chair. He did not lose his seat. Politics rarely offers endings clean enough for stories. He continued serving, quieter than before, and developed a habit of reading annexes personally. Years later, when a younger delegate dismissed a small species as harmless based on fleet tonnage, Thalen interrupted so sharply that the entire chamber stared at him. "Count the locks," he said. The younger delegate did not understand. Thalen did. The old warships went back to sleep mostly. Not all at once. The grief of Mars remained warm for 3 months. Patient thunder held partial power beneath Titan's ocean until engineers completed a full structural review. The Saint of Last Resort refused dormancy twice because Meridian legal filings continued using language it considered provocative. Human technicians eventually convinced it that bad prose was not a weapons lock, though the debate apparently took 6 hours and involved 3 judges. Across Sol, people visited memorial sites in numbers not seen for generations. Some came out of pride, some out of fear, some because they had lived their whole lives beside sleeping machines and only now understood the scale of the trust under their feet. Children pressed hands against armored viewing glass. Veterans stood in silence. Protesters held signs demanding dismantlement. Other protesters held signs demanding maintenance. A few old engineers simply looked exhausted. Ambassador Say visited the grief of Mars before returning to the council. She traveled by small shuttle through the Saturn rings, past ice fragments and old wreckage preserved by cold. Captain Adebio met her at the temporary dock inside the warship's outer service bay. The interior smelled of metal, dust, and renewed power. Human spaces always find a way to smell faintly human, even when they have been sealed for centuries. "How awake is it?" Say asked. "It's awake enough to judge our docking angle," Adebio said. "And did it disapprove? It suggested improvement." They walked to an observation gallery overlooking the central spine. The ship stretched into darkness beyond the lights, too large to feel like a machine and too deliberate to feel like a place. Say rested one hand on the rail. "I hoped they would not make us do this in my lifetime," she said. Adebio did not answer immediately. "They did not make us fire," she said. "I know. Well, that matters." Say nodded. "It matters more than they know." In the council archive, Ril Anvek updated Earth's file. He did not change the current fleet numbers. 9 patrol vessels remained 9 patrol vessels. The registered navy was still small. Earth still spent more on disaster response than weapons. Its diplomats still talked too much about moral obligations, historical memory, and the tedious work of keeping people alive. Well, he added a new section. Analytical caution. Human military capacity cannot be assessed solely by active expeditionary tonnage. Human strategic culture demonstrates significant investment in dormant territorial systems, legal trigger mechanisms, and symbolic defense architecture. Human restraint should not be modeled as incapacity. Human memorial spaces may possess enforcement capability. Do not assume that old means dead. Well, he stared at the last sentence. Then he added another. Do not assume that harmless means undefended. The final review session was smaller than the emergency ones. No market feeds, fewer reporters, less performance. Ambassador Say attended remotely from her office aboard the diplomatic courier returning to Unsil space. Thalen Voss attended in person. He looked older, though only 2 weeks had passed. That happens sometimes when a worldview has been forced to make room for facts. The chair asked if Earth wished to make a closing statement. "I'll say it did." "The Council's error was not that it underestimated our weapons," she said. "Weapons are easy to underestimate, everyone does it eventually. The deeper error was that it misunderstood why we kept them. Earth does not maintain old warships because we dream of old wars. We maintain them because history is full of people who mistook kindness for vacancy. We learn to leave guardians at the doors of places we cannot afford to lose. Graves, homes, children, the roads back to ourselves." She paused. "You declared Earth harmless. I understand why. We have tried very hard to become the kind of civilization that does not need to frighten its neighbors. But harmless is not the same as peaceful. Harmless means unable to stop harm. Peaceful means choosing not to begin it." For once, no one interrupted. "We are peaceful," Say said. "Please stop requiring us to demonstrate the difference." The session ended without applause. Council sessions almost never applauded. But when Earth's emblem faded from the chamber wall, many delegates remained seated for a long time. Outside Sol, the galaxy adjusted. Maps changed first. New warnings appeared around human memorial volumes. Transit systems updated recommended routes. Insurance rates became spiritual documents. Military academies assigned case studies with titles like dormant deterrence and symbolic misclassification. Popular feeds used less dignified titles. The weak Earth scared everyone with museum ships. Old human guns still work. Why you should read annexes before annoying humans. The jokes helped, they always do. Fear becomes easier to carry when someone puts handles on it. But beneath the jokes, the lesson remained. The galaxy had looked at Earth's active fleets and seen modesty. It had looked at human diplomacy and seen softness. It had looked at memorial zones and seen sentiment. Then old warships opened their eyes from inside moons, ice rings, asteroids, and graves, and the galaxy realized that humanity's past had not been put away. It had been placed carefully, facing outward. Years later, a merchant child traveling through the Saturn lanes would ask why so many ships slowed near a particular empty patch of ring shadow. Her parent would point to the navigation display, where a small warning marker glowed beside a dark shape that scanners politely refused to describe in detail. "That is the grief of Mars," the parent would say. "Is it dangerous?" The parent would think about the old story, the council vote, the Arvani held in place, the ambassador's correction, the way every power in the galaxy had suddenly learned to speak more gently around Saul. "Only if you step where you were told not to." The child would accept this, because children understand rules around graves better than adults think. And far away, beneath layers of ice and dust and law, the old warship would continue to sleep with one eye open, listening to the lanes, guarding the quiet, waiting for a day everyone sensible hoped would never come. Because Earth was harmless now. The council had said so.